Yeah, my name is Paul Wedding, and here I am today. And I think, how did I get here? Was it luck? Was it coincidence? Was it happenstance? Was it something else? Well, considering I don't believe in luck or coincidence or anything of the sort, it had to have been that something else. And that something else was the will of God. It was the will of God because 6 years ago, I was living in a dumpster in Westminster, California. And today I'm in an industry doing something that I never in a million years could have imagined that I would be doing right now. The will of God, I believe, is something you cannot mistake it for anything else but. It's a perfect integration of mind, body, and spirit. The mind takes this thought, this idea, at a subconscious level, and through repetitive thinking, it brings it to a conscious level, to where we accept it as truth, and we begin to act on it. Our bodies, we once again see them for what they are. They're a temple. And we want to take care of them. We want them operating at an optimal level. Our spirit, it cannot be broken. It cannot be shattered. We cannot be dissuaded from what it is we're doing. We once again return to our natural state of being. Passion drives our day. Clarity is right there in front of us. What we're experiencing internally, we externalize and we begin to attract everything it is that we need into our lives. People are just drawn to us. And ladies and gentlemen, that is something to get excited about because it happens for every single one of us. Every single one of us. It's the greatest find in buried human treasure. Now, if you go to a cemetery all too often, what you find is a lot of people that did not realize their greatness, their full potentials, but we have the opportunity where they don't. But too often what happens is not only do we understand the will of God for our own lives, we understand God's will for everybody else. Not only do we know what's best for us, we know what's best for you too. And you might know people like this. I think we know somebody like this over here. So what happens is there's a chapter, I believe it's in Proverbs 6:16. And it talks about 6 things that God hates. I know it's hard to imagine or associating anything to God and hate at the same time. But there's 6 things that God talks about that He hates. Jesus Christ speaks of a 7th, and He calls it an abomination. Now, for $65,000, what's the 7th? It's division among His people. And who is His people? It's every single one of us that has graced this planet. Without exception, without interpretation, without the human stamp, and without judgment. Without judgment. I was asked to speak to a group of men that were preparing to be released back into society after a period of incarceration. My role in this was to talk a little bit about where I was, what I did in my life, and to instill in these gentlemen that you can in fact do whatever it is you want to do with your life. By taking certain steps, following certain procedures, yes, you can in fact live the life you desire regardless of where you've been or what you've done. It doesn't matter. And this took place in a classroom that sat probably 100 people or so. But for this event, there was 25 to 30. And another speaker, a guy I wasn't aware of, a guy named Jason. And I was glad that this Jason guy was along. But what Jason was there to talk about was what he did following his release. And how he went about getting a job, finding a place to live, and what he did to sidestep the temptations that would have eventually landed him back into the place that he was. Now, we all went and grabbed seats. There was no individual seating. It was tables of 3 and 4. And I sat down at the front, first chair to the right of the main aisle. And Jason stood up, and he had one hand in his pocket, and he had his other hand out to us like this with his palm out. And he opened his talk with a question. And he said, "Are there any gays in this room?" And nobody said anything. People were looking at the ceiling. They were looking at the floor. Some were looking at each other and giggling. And the second stanza of this idiot's talk, he said, well, that's good, because God hates gays. And it was here I heard enough of Jason. And I got up and excused myself out of the room, and I went and sat outside in the hallway. And I was watching him as he was doing his presentation. And it was hard to see him through the dirty, scratched up plexiglass window. But from time to time, I could see him looking at me and smiling, and some of the people there, they were doing the same thing. So I kind of had an idea what was going on. Anyway, his talk ended, and he comes outside. I was already up, heading to the classroom, because it was my time to do my presentation. And we met halfway through, and he said, "Hey, Wedding, are you one of those gay lovers?" And again, I didn't say anything until he turned around and yelled, "If you are, you're not living God's will." I decided it was time to engage Jason with an answer. And I said, "Jason, let me tell you something. You don't know the first thing about God's will. You don't know the first thing. God did not give you the mental energies or mental capabilities that He didn't give me. I find the words that you use are crude and ignorant, and I don't think you're funny. I know what it's like to be treated as an outcast. I know what it's like to be ostracized by every group that you come in contact with. I know what it's like to be treated as if you're useless and you're not worthy of anyone's love. So no, Jason, you don't know the will of God. If you did, you'd be using words like love, kindness, humility, and graciousness. Things that are all in our spiritual constitution. Words that are aligned with God Almighty and not to lifestyle. Do I make myself clear, Jason?" So I think I made my point with Jason. What happens is when it's God's, when we understand that God has something in mind for us, when God has something in mind for us, it's a something that we ourselves cannot create on our own. It's not God asking if you have time this week or maybe kick it around next week. No, it's thy will be done.